Hi there. House of the Dragon Season three's exterior filming in Wales wrapped at the end of June. And among the spy reports that we collected from it was a pleasant surprise. Strong evidence indicating that they are not going to cut out the battle by the Lakeshore, the Fishfeed, the largest land battle of the entire war, and the direct confrontation between Stark and Lannister forces. Now, sorry I'm behind schedule on this, that when we got bigger leaks from the Hightower Army Camp filming in southeast England in July, I had to drop what I was doing to report on it, that we had our first spy photos of Daeron the Daring. That now that I've caught up with those, I'm backing up and covering all the Wales reports. They cover 4 topics, so I made 4 videos, but you could watch them in any order, so just keep watching this one. I only refer to this as number 2 out of 4 because chronologically it's the second, because this is the event that happens after the Battle of the Gullet. But again, watch it in any order, it's just the 4 different things. Now, for context, the main hub for exterior filming in Wales is in County Gwynedd in Northwest. The main hub there is at Dinnerwood Quarry, up in the mountains, this abandoned slate quarry, which for Season 2 they transformed into this massive exterior set for Harrenhal. And more generally, it's where they've tended to film exteriors that are set in and around the Riverlands. For the other storylines, for the Reach subplot, the High Towers, that's in southeast England. Dinnerwood Quarry is right next to a big glacial lake up in the mountains, so it's no surprise it's a good stand-in for Harrenhal, which is itself on the shore of this really big God's Eye lake. But since filming began in early June, we really weren't getting any spy photos out of there, and weeks passed, and we wondered why, and we kept thinking, this is the end of the long winter where we didn't have any content to go over, where are our spy photos? Even the spy drones weren't getting anything. Eventually, we found out why. And this isn't a rumor, it was reported in a local newspaper. They literally put up this covered gantry over the quarry to block out the spy drones from the air. Because, it's a quarry that, like a canyon, that they could literally cover it with this gantry to block out what was happening underneath. You can't do that in an open field for the Southeast England stuff. Mystery solved why we weren't getting so many spy photos. But like I said, this isn't a rumor. This entire video is based on one news article from a real local newspaper, the North Wales Daily Post. So that's why there are no photos, and why, also for saving time, I'm doing this as an audio-only podcast and hopefully unedited. That the link to the article is in the description box below. Please check that out. That's the only thing I'm referring to. But what is important is the article contained set spy verbal reports about what was going on there and what was going into it. Because we could tell for weeks that a lot of people were going into there. A lot of resources were going into there. That we got solid info that, the phrase is, you can't hide logistics on that scale. I think of it in Star Wars terms with the Death Star. Because we just had Andor. Well, Andor overlaps with the Star Wars Rebels cartoon as well. That in both, they make it a point in behind-the-scenes videos to say, like, the Death Star is such a massive mega project that as much as they try to keep it secret, you really can't hide the level of resources that are going to black sites. They can't tell what they're being used for, but they start piecing together, why are they strip mining Gorman for calcite? Delicious calcite, gorgeous calcite. Or they're hoarding kyber crystals from the holy city of Jeddah, mining it out. That they start to realize that, or in the cartoon it was on Geonosis, Saw Gerrera was there too, same actor, and they pointed out in that they're starting to wonder what is the Empire doing with all these resources? So even though we didn't know exactly what they were doing, we could tell they were doing something big at Dinnerwood Quarry based on the amount of stuff going into it, which is really the point of this video. That according to the report, something like 300 extras and crew went into Dinnerwig, along with a lot of horses. That you could tell they were bringing the scale of people and stuntmen in the hundreds for something that's a battle scene. At the place where they film Harrenhal and the Riverlands. But, on top of this, and this is to me what really seals the deal on all this has to be the Fishfeed. According to the report in the local news, numerous large trucks were seen transporting bulk-sized water containers to the site. And from however the newspaper managed to figure this out from, local order forms or whatever, because there is a paper trail, they found out how much water. 38,000 liters of water that they felt the need to transport into there. Well, 38,000 liters of water, what is that? That figure is meaningless gibberish to me. But then I did math to convert it into real units. That's 10,000 gallons of water. That's a number I can comprehend. And on top of this, the set spy reporting in the Daily Post said they actually knew what it was for. A rain scene. That apparently they had this big battle scene that was supposed to take place during a driving rainstorm. But the forecast said there wouldn't be any in real life, that normally they try to time that to when it's actually raining. So they had to bring in a bunch of those big artificial rainstorm machines, which they've used from time to time in other seasons, and the 10,000 gallons of water were to fuel them. At this scale, it can't possibly be for individual characters. Like 2 people on a rainy day. You could film that somewhere else. You could use a blue screen for that. It wouldn't make sense. These aren't Benioff and Weiss who said, no, we need to actually film this in a rain. Just the logistics aren't worth it. You can rig up one rain machine to effectively cover 1 or 2 people in a conversation. That this is a driving rainstorm for a battle scene involving 300 stuntmen and crew plus horses, being filmed around the Harrenhal set, in the Riverlands area more broadly. This has to be a battle scene. It almost certainly is the battle by the Lakeshore. This is the biggest land battle of the entire war. It's nicknamed the Fishfeed because so many men die on both sides. The cruel joke is that the fish of the lake were feasting for weeks after this, literally. And I did the math. I'm going to do another video on this because the chronicler only reports how many knights died, not how many levies died. Both sides combined, something like 45,000 men might have died at the Fishfeed. This is like one of the bloodiest land battles in the history of Westeros. And we are actually going to be getting it on screen. I was worried they cut it, but then I kept saying they're doing so much to set up the Riverlands front of the war, the effort that goes into getting all the Riverlands vassals, into getting the Winter Wolves, who play a major part in it, in setting up the Lannister army coming from the west, that when those 2 forces clash, it'd be weird, the principle of Chekhov's gun, it'd be weird if they didn't appear. So we will be getting payoff for that. Oscar Tully will be doing stuff in this, Roderick Dustin will be doing stuff in this, Black Alley Blackwood will be doing things in this. And I also said that, I've covered this in other videos, that based on Ryan Condal's comment that there's 4 big events from the books this season, we know the first is the Gullet, the second is King's Landing, and the fourth we're already getting spy photos from is Tumbleton. The third one, the only other big event on that scale, would be the Fishfeed. And we're waiting for it, and just the fact that they're getting 10,000 gallons for rain machines, there's hundreds of men going into that set. I mean, we were starting to get worried, but I'm feeling really good about this. I'm sorry I don't have time to edit this, but I'm thinking this is going to be like, well, my mental image of how they're going to do the Fishfeed is Kenneth Branagh's Henry V movie. How he did Agincourt. If you've seen that, please tell everyone in the comments. Join in here. That where it's just this total mess of everyone man-piling each other in the mud with horses falling. You can't see what's going on. In short, I think the Fishfeed is going to be this giant screw you to Benioff and Weiss, because it's going to be sort of like, what if the Battle of the Bastards was done the right way? Where the people praising it are the ones who go, well, it's okay if you turn your brain off and don't pay attention to all the things that don't make sense. From a tactical perspective, from a character perspective, just physically, that The Battle of the Bastards is nothing but vanity shots of Kit Harington, oneer shots following Kit Harington to pander him for awards. And Benioff and Weiss wanted to rip off other things, so they insisted they'll be fighting in the mud. I guess they must have seen Henry V, but they didn't know how to film it well. And here's the thing. It is the middle of... It's the start of winter. They've just had snowstorms. Why is there that much mud at Winterfell? The ground isn't soft. I mean, visibly, that is very strange. There's so many things they didn't account for. That another thing that made filming go over schedule was it honestly never occurred to them that they film multiple takes. So if there's snow on the ground, they have to waste hours of crewmen sprinkling fake snow on the ground so it doesn't look like people were trotting on it in the take before that. No one thought of that when it's such an obvious thing. But no, it's winter. Yet, why would there be mud? After relatively little, even in a battle, there isn't that much mud to the point they're practically drowning in it, even with feet churning it up like that. Guys, given that we're over 3 years into the Russian invasion of Ukraine, I think most of you have heard at some point or another in the past 3 years about the mud season. That spring and fall, tanks can't go across the plains of Ukraine so they don't go on new offensives because they get stuck in the mud. Now, I was anticipating that back in February of 22 because I'm a history major and I watch a History Channel a lot, and I remembered, hey, wait a minute, during World War II, didn't the tank columns have to stop in the spring because they got washed out in the mud season? That anyone familiar with that location knows that's when the mud happens. And what have the Russians been doing since then, in the present day? Waiting for winter when the ground hardens and there isn't mud. But no, they had this mental image of Kit Harington fighting his way through the mud, literally churning and crawling through it, in the man pile, when this has nothing to do with the reality of what should be happening in the context of the fictional universe. It's just a bunch of cool shots they slapped together. In contrast, an army of men fighting during an actual rainstorm on a lakeshore would be a ton of mud. They said they're literally fighting in the reeds in ankle-deep water. And this is going to be just a mud fight. This is going to be Mimban from Star Wars, where it reminds me of trench warfare from World War I. But no, the real thing is the Kenneth Branagh Henry V, where the big thing was they waited for the heavy rain so that the French cavalry would get slipped up from that, and it just degenerates into chaos. I think not only are we getting Fishfeed, but it's essentially Battle of the Bastards done the right way. For those of us who have been, like Glidus, like Supercuts, others, me, going, this is not a triumph of storytelling, there's so much wrong with this. How much of this will we actually get at scale? That's another question, because Rook's Rest had 500 extras. This has 300 extras plus crew. That actually doesn't worry me. Just heading you off in case someone's going to point that out in the comments. Because, think about it. Rook's Rest or Tumbleton, it's in this big field, it's clearly visible, broad daylight. Kind of the entire point of the Fishfeed is that it degenerates into chaos. Even in the book where they don't describe heavy rain, that if it's going to be this giant mud fight, it is intentionally chaotic and hard to see anything. Now, the difference, of course, you're going to go, Benioff and Weiss did that season 8. Well, they didn't understand that you're supposed to not do long takes focused on man piles. I've talked about this in other videos, how Sapochnik said, basically, I had enough, and in frustration, I re-edited it. That even what you see in season 8 wasn't their true vision, that they wanted you to see Arya in a man pile for 10 minutes. Or for a solid 5 minutes, Brienne just struggling and making a straining face. And they think, the actor's emoting, therefore this is art. And Sapochnik's going, there's no pacing to it. You've ruined the pacing. You can't just have one takes of people struggling in man piles like that. It doesn't even look particularly chaotic anymore. It's just confusing. That in order to keep that energy going. I really hope this is coming across. I'm sorry I don't have time to do this more fully. Maybe when we start getting photos of this, for the first trailers and stuff, there'll be a shot or two and I can follow up on it. This is just a heads up. The big thing was at the beginning of the podcast here, we're getting the fish feed. Second thing is, I think this is going to put to shame what Benioff and Weiss did, because even if you don't like the writers, the House of the Dragon directors have never failed us. They are amazing, and without Benioff and Weiss micromanaging their directors, these guys actually know what they're doing. That Perister, who will be handling that, I think is going to be in episode 6, just based on the director's schedule. He tends to do the big battles. I think it'll be Perister doing episode 6. This will be chaos done the right way, like Henry V. I'm also thinking of like Black Hawk Down, where there's dirt flying everywhere, but you still have a sense of where things are happening, even though it's still chaotic. I'm going in circles here. My point is, for a battle that's meant to be a fight in the mud in a driving rainstorm, you don't really need a wide shot of 300 to 500 men. You know, like, you could plausibly film this with 20 stuntmen just artfully edited. And I get that, and they actually have a couple of hundred, 200 or 300 guys. Which again ties back into what Benioff and Weiss did with Winterfell, where if you haven't seen the behind-the-scenes videos, please do. Like the one I use as my cover video. And please remark on this. I'm begging you, remark on this in the comments if you have, to bring it up for attention for people who aren't aware of it. Educate them. When we saw the behind-the-scenes videos for Season 8, they actually hired hundreds upon hundreds of stuntmen for the Battle of Winterfell. Something like, I think, 600, more than they'd ever had. But when you see that behind-the-scenes documentary of just the sheer number of extras that you could never see, or it would be so dim we assumed were CGI, and it was a waste of time and money. And the human suffering, because they made them do it in the middle of winter, and they really didn't know how to prepare for that. That's a case where it's so chaotic you really don't need that many stuntmen. They were trying to impress the trade papers and the reporters with, when they gave people set tours, like George Lucas himself, reporters, look at the scale of stuff we built. Look how much money we spent. Look how many extras we hired. And it worked. It impressed people. The logistics of, because you're spending other people's money versus you don't know how to film it well. So I think that the fish feed in Season 3 has a good chance of one-upping both, well, one-upping Long Night is a fish in a barrel, but just pointing out, we can film what in the story is a big battle with not as many stuntmen, 300 as opposed to 500, because it's a rainstorm and it's chaotic. You wouldn't even be able to see the people in the back. While at the same time really shaming Battle of the Bastards for, you just wanted to do Agincourt. They even said in the thing, we were trying to do Agincourt, word for word. Well, they said we started with Kenai, but then Sapochnik said Kenai was nothing like this. So they had this mental image of piles of dead bodies in the mud because they ripped off Agincourt. And they said they did. When, why, though, please tell me in the comments if you are from a country that experiences the mud season. I get a few people in here from Eastern Europe. That if you've ever, or I think that happens in the plains of America as well, when there's the mud season where the melt water from the mountain glaciers is coming down. This doesn't happen in winter. It is now infamous that you've been reminded with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, armies wait for winter when the ground is hard. What does that even mean? Why is there all this mud at winter if it's not near a river? Wouldn't this be better for, like, if they had actually shown the battles of the fords with Edmure Tully versus Tywin's army? That would have made sense, because they're fighting in a ford for river crossing versus this. But this is, the fish feed is going to be fighting on the lakeshore, in some cases ankle-deep water in the reeds, because the Lannisters get pushed back to the point a lot of them drown, because their back is against the wall. There's nowhere to run. And on top of that, a driving rainstorm. And the key of this is the number of men going in there, and you would only need rain machines on this scale for a major battle scene. So I really think we are getting the fish feed. Another thing is that we're seeing more and more people cast for the Riverlands story. If they were skipping that, they wouldn't have done so much setup with the Lannisters. It gives Black Ally Blackwood more to do that we've seen. She's in 5 out of 8 episodes. So admittedly, this is guesswork based on, I don't have that puzzle piece, but I have all the other puzzle pieces of what's going into the Harrenhal set. I have a good idea of what exactly they're doing in there. We can guess pretty well. We're going to get the fish feed.